So that is the full workflow for actually positioning your material and sending a job to the machine. Um, and we're actually made a nice little PDF of that I'll make sure that we send out to everybody. Um, again, bear with me. This is a work in progress, and you can probably tell this took several hours of my life to throw together in this manner. There are a lot more slides that didn't make the cut that, like I said, I want to put into a different class. But I figured, this is the good stuff. This will help you find settings and confidently maneuver through the laser and give you a good workflow. So I'll make sure we get those PDFs out so you guys can print that little workflow and just keep it next to your machine, and reference it as you get started. And that's all about, the next section here, which is forming good habits. So it's like anything new, those habits start to form pretty fast. So you want to make sure you're doing it right, because it's really hard to break a bad habit. I remember when I was learning how to surf, that was one of the things that was quickly told to me, is that you try to stand up and the first thing you do is put your knee down. And I was scolded for that by my buddies, and they're like, don't do that, or it's going to be really hard to stop. So you want to make sure we're giving you guys all the best practices here before it becomes an automatic behavior in your brain and you no longer have control over it, which happens. These are how bad habits form. So here are some good habits. Again, the pause button. More often than not, you can avoid the emergency stop by just pressing pause. So if you're there, if you're cutting a new piece of material and you're standing in front of the machine for the first time, or just in general, keep your finger over that button while the machine's running. That's what I do. I still do it. It's just a habit. Again, a good habit. So if I see a flare up or something's not supposed to be happening, or, whatever, my material moves for some reason, I just press the button, and it stops you from, the extreme, which is smashing the emergency stop button and panicking. Autofocus check. Here's a good one. Sometimes autofocus sensors fail. They're right in the line of fire. They get dirty easily. It's part of the maintenance that we're going to go through here in a bit. But if your autofocus sensor isn't working and you try to use it, it's not going to stop the bed from going up. The bed's just going to keep going, and it makes a delightful sound. Don't worry if it happens to you. You can't break this machine, I promise you. We might lose a part here or there, but they're all replaceable. And this machine really is a sum of its parts. It doesn't exist outside of that. So motors, they'll make a terrible sound if you try to force them to stop. So when you do crash your bed into your laser head, it will make a horrifying sound. I assure you, you're not damaging anything more than what you're actually seeing happening, and that's your material smashing into a laser head. And if that does happen, you definitely want to let us know. But you can avoid that by just pressing the gold focus probe up and down a few times manually before you get started for the day. Or if you're really nervous about it, you could do it between jobs. But if you should see a little red light turning on and off on top of the laser head. That just confirms that the sensor is receiving the signal that it should be receiving. So that's all. Just a little thing to just always make sure it works. Preview and frame. Small mistakes will happen, which is why you want to double check before you begin. And this is really going to save you a lot of heartache. So your preview is going to make sure that your layers are being processed in the right order. And it also is going to help you optimize that total runtime. Once we get into optimization, which is going to be for another chapter. And then framing at the job. Don't forget to always frame it before you flame it. That's the motto. So before you hit that start button, press frame a few times just to make sure it's in the right spot. Saves you material. And then MSDS. Again, make sure your laser material is safe, and do your due diligence. There's no comprehensive list of here's what's safe and here's what's not. In my opinion, it's all unsafe. Some are just more unsafe than others, but you don't want to breathe any of this stuff in. what you're really trying to avoid is damaging the machine by lasering corrosive stuff, and obviously lasering stuff that's combustible or that just, you know, can, like chlorine that turns into acid in the air. But don't experiment with unknown materials, or again, anything that emits chloride gas. So when in doubt, reach out to the laser community, do some searches on Google. You know, the forums can be a resource. I tend to look for documents written by other companies. But this is a really sticky subject, you know, and our attorneys were like, you know, the best thing you can tell your customers is to do research before they put something in there, because that creates a good habit. Versus if I made you a list of what's safe and what isn't, if I left one thing off and that day you decide that's what you're going to laser, that becomes a liability for everybody. So just check it. It's important. And make sure you're getting good advice. There's plenty of people out there that are like, oh, I laser PVC all the time. And, you know, don't take advice from those people. Just make sure that, you know, you're finding reputable sources, or call us. Just if you don't know, just call and we'll do the research for you and we'll tell you if you can do it or not. And keep an eye on your environment. The temperature is important, especially with the humidity changes and your dew point. We talked about condensation, but we didn't talk about what happens during the winter. So, you know, when you're having, you know, a really cold freeze, hey, you got water in all those lines. And if those freeze, you can break your laser tube. It never fails. The day after a hard freeze, we get the phone calls and people are saying like, hey, my laser was working yesterday and it's not anymore. I'm like, how cold did it get last night? And usually what'll happen is the plumbing inside of the laser tube that pumps the water through is also glass. And, you know, it's like leaving a beer in the freezer. It's going to explode and it's going to break inside of there. So some tips to winterize your machine: take the water out. That's what I would do. I mean, unless you really want to just be in your garage and or basement with your Parker on lasering, just drain it. And if you do take the time to drain it, it is nice if you you know, blow the excess air from the plumbing out. You can use your air compressor to do that. You could also physically do it and grab a, you know, a hose and blow through it. And it'll just get the little remnants of water out of all the little turns in the plumbing. Some people put antifreeze in their lines. I got to tell you, I've lived in Florida my whole life. I don't know anything about that, but I do know it's done, and it really is a thing that if you do it correctly, it's safe. You definitely want to find a good resource for making a good concoction of you know, a mixture between antifreeze and water. You know, you lose some of the cooling properties by using the antifreeze. So that's something to keep in mind. And of course, you don't want to, you know, risk corroding any lines or doing anything like that. So just make sure that you find a relevant source for that. I think I've seen a couple of good ones out there, but you don't need much. And the type of antifreeze you want to use is the kind that is used in like an RV or in a boat. You're not using the stuff you put into your car engine. So there's appropriate types to use, and you don't, again, you want to, it's a small amount that you put in there from what I understand. But yeah, if you really need help pointing to a resource on that, just, you know, reach out to us. I know that I've seen a couple of good articles online that go over it in detail. And again, safety first. You know, I can't stress that enough. The dangers of operating a laser are ever present. They never go away. You just get comfortable around it and you figure, well, you know, I haven't gotten hurt yet. So you tend to let your guard down, but don't, you know, be safe all the time. Keep your kids away from the machine, especially while it's running. And, you know, it's not going to happen to you now. This is something where you're going to be super careful in the beginning. And then, you know, a year from now, you're going to be doing everything wrong. So, you just respect it. And then routine maintenance, keeping your laser in tip-top condition. That's gonna set you up for ultimate success, including your business. I mean, you definitely don't want your machine to go down because you're not maintaining it. And it's far less costly in repairs. And we're lucky. We got smartphones. You could talk to your phone and tell it to remind you that you need to clean it or do a water change or get Alexa involved. Figure it. Use your technology to maintain your technology. It's really nice. And that's the last section here we're going to get into is what you should maintain periodically. And again, a little routine schedule is fine. Now, there isn't a whole lot of maintenance that's necessary, but you definitely want to take a proactive approach. So it's treat it like anything else that you really value. Take care of it, and it'll take care of you. So here's kind of what a good schedule will look like. Now, some of this stuff is really user-based. It depends on the materials you're using, how much smoke it creates, how much soot it creates, and how often you're doing it. So the first three here are pretty much as needed. Your nozzle, your optics, which I'm referring to your mirrors and lenses, and the actual work area, the honeycomb bed, or the blades. So you can make a habit of doing that stuff weekly. I'll tell you this much, it's much easier to clean soot off of your honeycomb or your blades if you do it more often than not. Think about your oven. Everyone's had to clean an oven before or a grill. The longer you wait, the more of a chore it's going to be. And then that focus sensor I talked about, I had that in there as bi-weekly, just something to just check and clean. Again, this really is just, we're being overly cautious here. So you don't have to obsess over this, but just be on the lookout for signs of like, hey, I need to clean that. It's looking a little dirty. Now changing the water in the chiller, there's no real evidence out there to say like, you need to change it this much. I remember there was a batch of lasers that went out, I think a year or two ago, where the metal used in the tanks was different. So the manufacturer, the supplier of the tanks used a different metal, and it was causing an algae bloom. And so we had like a dozen Mira 7 owners who were experiencing a lot of algae growth. And they started changing their water very regularly, quarterly even, to keep it going. So, at that point, we're like, that's probably just a safe thing. But honestly, if you've got a new model Mira right now, chances are your tank's plastic. You don't have, that issue. And before that, they switched to, a stainless steel tank. So it took care of that as well. And we ended up swapping everyone's chillers and tanks out to remedy that. But you don't have to change it that often. I'm going to stick to quarterly on here. But, if quarterly turned into once a year, it's probably going to be okay. A good way to know is really when the machine's off, open up your laser tube hatch and look inside the tube. The water inside the laser tube should be clear. It should not be brown. If it is, drain it, and you want to put new water in it and make sure it's distilled water. You want water that's not going to promote algae growth. Some people put a couple of drops of algicide in it. We recommend it too, just to be on the safe side, but it's really not a big deal if you're using the right kind of water. And if you've got an air compressor, you want to drain that. I put daily because I live in Florida. It's very, very humid here. So if I run my air compressor for 10 minutes, I promise you there's going to be water inside that tank, and it corrodes pretty quickly. So here's what the nozzle cleaning looks like. You unscrew it, you wipe it down with a cloth and some 90% isopropyl alcohol. That's all you need. And this is the final exit point, again, at the bottom of your laser head. So it's gonna get charred up. You're gonna see some residue on there, and what you don't want is it to start building up and start covering the hole, the exit point of that nozzle. So it gets dirty pretty quick. And the optics, having a clean lens and mirrors is super important. The minute your lens or your mirrors get dirty, they stop letting light pass through it, and they start absorbing the light. They start to get hot, and then eventually they'll break and they'll crack. And you want that laser beam to reflect off of the mirrors and go through that lens without losing a lot of energy. The minute they start getting dirty, it starts to get hot. That means it's taking that heat away from your material, and it's getting absorbed by your optics. And what I recommend is treat your optics the way you would your expensive sunglasses or a camera lens. Blow or lightly dust before you wipe. You know, if you're going to go straight for wiping, all you're doing is getting whatever particles are on there and you're just going to scratch it. So get a lens wiping kit, lens cleaning kit. On Amazon, they're like $10. And just get one from like a camera lens. It'll come with a nice little blower, like a bulb that you just squeeze and it blows. And then you just can dust it as well. And then you can wipe it in a circular motion with like a little lens cleaning wipe or some isopropyl 90% alcohol. Which ones do you need to clean the most? Honestly, mirror 1 is in the back of your machine. I seldom have ever cleaned that. Mirror 2, very rarely as well, because it's mounted to the gantry off to the left, so that really doesn't get too dirty. The ones that really get dirty is your mirror 3 on top of your laser head. That one's going to see some smoke in its time, so that one gets dirty pretty quick. And your lens, of course, because smoke, if it's entering through the top of the laser head, it's getting on that mirror and it's also getting on that lens. So the right way to really do that is you can take the mirror 3 mirror out. If you look at the top of your laser head, it's got a little boomerang shape, like a little silver boomerang piece. And it's got these tiny little Allen bolts that hold it in. If you remove that boomerang, then you can just pop the mirror out and clean it. Now, there are other bolts up there and there are adjustment knobs up there. You do not want to touch those. Don't take the whole bracket off. I've seen that done before, and it's an easy mistake to make. That big black bracket that holds the mirror, leave it where it is because you dialed that in. You know, that's already aligned. So you can remove the mirror by itself without touching that bracket. Clean it, put it back in, and you don't have to align anything. And if you take the bracket off, it's not the end of the world, but you're probably going to need to call us. And the same with the lens. If you are going to, some people will clean their mirror 3 inside of the laser head by sticking like a Q-tip or something, you know, through the opening of the laser head. I don't recommend it. I think that's a lazy way to do it. Of course, it means you don't have to take it out, but you know, all the dirt and soot that's coming off of there, it's probably falling on top of your focal lens down below anyway. So, you know, just take some time and take it out and wipe it down. Now, you could look in there easily to see if it needs cleaning, and if it looks foggy at all, or if you see a little smudge, that's enough. Take it out and clean it. You're going to lose power that way. And the life of your mirrors and your lens is going to be shortened if you run them dirty. If you don't catch it right away, it's just going to break your lens. When you take your lens out, that is the little lens caddy, the little red cartridge on the side of your laser head for the mirror. For the Novas, the whole bottom of the laser head just slides out. But you don't have to remove the lens from the caddy to clean it. You can clean it in there. It's usually the best way. And you just slide it back in. And then, of course, your work area, we talked about that a few times. So keeping it clean reduces, you know, the risk of fire, and the off-gassing that we talked about. All that soot on that area just is going to keep releasing VOCs into the air, which you don't want to breathe. So the more often you clean the inside of your laser, the better. It's really easy to clean. Like right now, your laser is brand new. You can get it looking clean if you maintain it regularly. You don't have to obsess over it. I do see a lot of that. People want to get their honeycombs, you know, spick and span. It's the majority of the cleaning that needs to be done is to remove all of that soot, not to make it look nice. So if you don't get all of it, that's fine, because guess what? You're going to put it back in the machine and you're just going to mess it up in the minute you do one job. So don't spend your time trying to make it look factory, you know, like new. Just get the bulk of it off, stick it back in the machine, and you know, get down and dirty again. It's really, you know, not something you want to obsess over. And again, we talked about that focus sensor, just routinely cleaning it. It's that focus sensor really is something you don't even need to remove it to clean it. Just kind of clean around it, push the sensor up. Q-tip might help, in that area, but I seldom see them getting dirty anymore. It's really, usually a cause of just not having good airflow and a lot of smoke building up in that area. So if you've got your exhaust set up and your smoke's going straight out the back, you're probably never going to see a whole lot of smoke or debris accumulating on that sensor. Now, those focus sensors, those little gold probes, if you do have a collision or you bend one, they are easily replaced. You have some spares you should have gotten with your machine. And on the right hand side of the laser head in the mirrors, there's a little tiny Allen screw that's recessed into it. You just need to loosen that Allen screw, and then you can unscrew the gold probe from the bottom of the focus sensor assembly. So if you need to ever change it, just make sure that you're undoing that little Allen set on the side, and then you can unscrew it and screw a new one back in there. So no big deal. If you bend the probe, that's probably the number one choice of things I would bend before something else bent. So it's a cheap little part. We give everyone, I think, 3 or 4 of them in their machines. I've had 1 or 2 people ask for more, but most people learn their lesson the first time. And yeah, just again, more stuff on soot accumulating on there. We talked about the water chiller already and why you want to keep that clean. And again, it also, prevents clogging in the system. So, just make sure you're checking that water regularly. Again, if you change it quarterly or semi-annually, you're fine. And an air compressor, if there's moisture building up inside of it, the tank will rust from the inside. And, you definitely want to avoid that. So at the end of your day, if you get in the habit of opening that port on the bottom of the air compressor, I'm talking about an add-on air compressor, not the pump that came with the machine, because that doesn't have a tank. But if you buy an air compressor to add on, it's going to have a tank, and that tank, usually, depending on the air that's getting pulled in and the humidity in it, it's going to start accumulating water inside of it, and you want to drain it often. Otherwise, yeah, it just corrodes from the inside out, and it's not it's not nice, because then then you've got rusty water spraying out of it. It's not a good thing. And on that note, if you do install an air compressor, make sure you get an air filter for it, and that'll help make sure that any moisture from that tank isn't making it into your laser head. So that little air filter will serve as a little moisture trap, and it'll just stop water from going through and out of your laser head.